Mentor text to the writing resource wall. Mentor text is high quality writing, and typically it's from a published piece of text. And that means it could be any type of genre, any type of text. Narratives, informative explanatory, poetry, magazines, anything that is published. But also, we could use what we have written in our own class. So we're going to use mentor text from published text, but also from activities that we have done together in our class. The whole purpose of mentor text is for us to focus on an author's ideas, on their style, on techniques, on strategies, words and phrases. Here's a problem that we face many times when we're using mentor text. We may read a text to our children, or they may be reading a text in order to focus on a technique, an idea, words and phrases, so that they can transfer and connect that to their own writing. Some children can do that, but many children have a difficult time. That's where the disconnect comes from, for them to take what they've been focusing on that the author, a published author, is showing us, or what we've done in our own work in our classroom, and transfer it to their own writing. I'm going to show you how we're going to use anchor charts. And those anchor charts are going to help the students transfer what they've been focusing on in the mentor text to their own writing. In order to have an anchor chart, you need to have a certain way that you format it so that they can use it while they're writing. You need to, first of all, have some sort of a purpose for that chart. So what is my purpose? The chart's purpose is to help you form ideas for your writing, to help you find transitions in your writing, for figurative language. So while you're planning your writing, you may need to have a transition. You may need to have an adjective or some descriptive language. That's the purpose. This is what you need in your writing right now, and that's the purpose of that anchor chart, to give you that descriptive language or figurative language, whatever element that you need to put into your writing. So the first thing you want to do is you want to, on your anchor chart, make sure your students know this chart is for, and whatever the purpose is for in their writing. Once you have that, then you need to organize those ideas, those words, those phrases that you are putting on that anchor chart. You are either going to organize it in a sequence, steps, so students need to follow specific steps in order to use this author's technique or style, or you are going to organize the information on the anchor chart in categories. Categories are more for students to select from a category in order to put that information in their writing. So you are either going to organize the information in steps or in categories, depending on the type of information. And finally, I'm going to show you how you will fill in that anchor chart. Sometimes you may present anchor charts that are complete. Sometimes you will have ongoing charts that you will fill in with the students all year long. Let's get started and show you all the different charts. On this page, we have our personal narrative idea anchor chart. The purpose of this chart is to provide students with ideas for personal narratives. Hence, when a child is ready to write a personal narrative and they're coming up with an idea and they can't think of one, what can they do? They can go to the anchor chart. Next, how do we organize this chart? This chart has been organized in categories. And the reason for that is when you have a personal narrative, it is a true story about yourself and it needs to be memorable. And memorable means something happened to you and made you have an emotional reaction. So it is an experience in which something made you happy, mad, embarrassed, scared, proud. You could add even more categories of emotions, but I'm sorting ideas by emotions. Underneath the emotions, I want to have some synonyms for those words so that the children have more sophisticated vocabulary if they need it in their writing. Then below, I have pictures. When I present this to the students, I present not only the chart with the emotions on it and the words, but I also have a few pictures under each one to show them, boys and girls, these are some things that happened to me that made me happy. I had a special present. I lost my tooth. I was able to order anything on the menu. So I tell them that these are things that happened when I was at their grade level. I present these ideas to the students with a few already recorded. But we need to also get students' ideas on here. And when you ask students, think of a time when something made you happy or sad. Sometimes that will stonewall students. They can't come up with any ideas at all. It's like giving someone a writing prompt. They can't think of something because they get nervous because you're asking them on the spot. Notice there's these Post-its on this chart. Students have great ideas and great experiences. The problem is that it's hard to remember them when you just ask them on the spot. I put a Post-it pad near this chart, and many times after the weekend or before the weekend starts or at the beginning of the day or after recess, something has happened that's caused an emotional reaction to a student and they want to tell you about it. Unfortunately, we have to start teaching in our classroom, so we can't have these long conversations. I tell the child, draw a picture and write your name and put it under the right emotion. And when we are having our personal narrative lessons, we can use one of your stories. Or later, when you're writing your own personal narratives, you can find that up on the chart and use that to write your own story. So this is a great way to build personal narratives and different ideas, not only from yourself, but also from the students. Let's look at building ideas for an imaginative story. Our purpose is a story planner. And when I say story planner, I'm talking about an imaginative story. This is an ideal strategy for you to connect reading to writing, but also increase comprehension and give students an understanding of why they need to know setting, character, plot. So I will, on a story planner, write out setting, character, plot, and every time we finish a story, we will label a small piece of paper with the setting, the when, and the where. So we'll have two little cards for when and where, a card for character, and a card for plot. And we will do that for story after story after story. Let me show you what that looks like. Here's the story planner anchor chart. What I've done is I've written setting, character, plot, and the children have learned what those terms mean. So every time we finish a story, we're always going to quickly say, what was the setting? Our setting was when? Long ago. Where? In China. Who was it mostly about? A brave young girl. What was the plot? What was the problem or the main event? She risks her life to save her father. Next week, we may be reading another story. This was called Lost and Found. When we finish the story, when did it happen? One sunny afternoon. Where? In a magical world. Who was this about? Well, it was mostly about a girl and two boys, so 3 characters, all right? What was the plot? They became friends after working together. And as you can see, I continue this, one story after another. We identify the setting, character, and plot. This becomes a story planner anchor chart because I tell the students, boys and girls, good writers read a lot. Sometimes they pick and choose ideas from other stories they've read to come up with their own story. Watch how they do this. Let's say that we want to have a setting. Let's have this setting. Late one evening. Let's have the setting here. In a magical world. Who could be in our setting? Ooh. Goofy mice. Plot. What could we say happens in our setting? Risk their life to save their father. We have, late one night, in a magical world, some goofy mice risk their life to save their father. That's going to be our idea for a story. Because what we did was we blended together ideas from other stories that we've read. This is a great way for you to show children not only does identifying the setting, character, and plot help you understand what a story is about, You can also see these different parts and pick and choose from other stories to create your own. How did I get the kids to fill this in? When I finish a story, I have 4 pieces of paper. I ask the students, tell each other when the story was happening, where the story was happening, who the main character was, and what was it mainly about? What was the problem or main event? So we do a quick summary of what the story was about. I write it out, I hand this to the students. If there needs to be a quick picture on it, they draw it, color it in, and put it on the chart. It should be a fast and quick activity, but look how valuable this is to use as an anchor chart if they need some ideas to form their own stories. What do we have on our anchor chart? What was our purpose? To plan an imaginative story. How did we organize it? We organized it by categories: setting, character, plot. How did the chart get filled in? It got filled in all year long. When we finished a story that we were focusing on, we would go back and put what the setting was, when and where, the character, and the plot as a quick summary, a fast way to say what a story is about. Not only will this quick summary help you out to come up with an idea for a story, but when you're writing an opinion about a narrative, what do you do when you first start your opinion for your narrative? You have to give a quick summary. This teaches children how to practice giving a quick summary, as well as helping them come up with ideas for a new story. On the facing page, you will see setting anchor charts. This is for narrative writing. When students are planning a story and they need to come up with a setting and how to say that setting, they can look at their setting anchor charts. How are the setting anchor charts set up? In categories, we have a when and we have a where. The charts behind me are the same exact charts that you see in your book. So we've organized by when and by where, but they have categories on them. You can categorize by the weather, season, time, and even an event if you want. Weather. It could be sunny out, windy out, rainy, snowy, foggy. So notice up on our chart, we've categorized with pictures of weather. We could have winter, spring, summer, fall. You could have a time, long ago, late at night, one day. You have all these different categories in pictures showing either weather, season, time. If it was an event, it would be something like on Michael's 9th birthday, on the last day of school. That could be an event. So we have our when. Once we have our when with our pictures, notice you have phrases next to it. So if a student was writing a story and they were trying to plan out, when could I have my story happen? One of the things I tell them is, think about how you want your reader to feel about what's going on in the story. Oh, I want them to feel like it's wonderful and really a great little place. Oh, okay. So let's go to weather. What kind of weather would feel wonderful? Oh, I could go to the sunny one or maybe the spring day. What if it started scary? Maybe I could go over here where it's rainy, cloudy, snowy, or nighttime. So when you're using the chart, you could start by asking the students, think about how you want the reader to feel about your setting. Go to that picture. Next, find the phrase that you like best that would fit that setting, that time. Next to the when chart, you have the where chart. How is this organized? It's organized by pictures as well. These pictures are organized more by habitats, or I like to just say to the kids, the large area. When you are introducing a setting, you're not going to say to a reader that the frog is on a rock. You're going to know that the story is taking place out at the pond. Then you can have the frog on the rock. Just like long ago in a magical kingdom, what are we doing? We're giving the where, and that is the big setting. Where is our character? We're taking our reader there. We're building the big picture. Then you can get into more details, specifically where they're at. So the big picture is maybe they could be out in the mountains or in the desert or in the ocean or the jungle or out on a tropical island. It's endless, but you just want to make sure that it's a large enough setting so that your reader can visualize where the story is taking place. So you have the picture, and then you go again to where is this taking place? Choose your location. So your location is your where. And then you can find the matching phrases next to this to see how you may want to word your location. We've seen that the purpose of this chart is a setting chart. We've organized it in categories. But how do we fill in this chart? The how can be done through published text or your own classroom work. Cynthia Rylant wrote Night in the Country. When I start reading the story to the students, I tell them, boys and girls, the author has created the setting for us on this first line. Let's listen to the words. There is no night so dark, so black as night in the country. When I notice that an author has started the story with a sophisticated and interesting setting, I'll write it on a strip of paper. So where could we put this phrase? We go to our where chart. Let's put it over here where we have all these trees, and we'll put that strip of paper, we'll just tape right up on our anchor chart. What are we doing when we do this activity? Not only will we have sophisticated words and phrases to go to that we could use as a model for our writing, but also the other thing that we're doing is we are teaching children comprehension strategies, because I alerted them, what are we listening for? The setting. After we read the setting, we understood, where does that setting go? Over where the country is. How does that setting make you feel? When we said, there is no night so dark, so black as night in the country. Let's visualize that. When you see the bright sunlight and it's warm out, how do you feel? Happy. When I read, there is no night so dark. Uh-oh, something's really dark. What do you think? Oh, I'm getting a little scared. So black as night in the country. I can't see. Look what the author's done. These words not only create a picture, but an emotion. It's sort of a scary feeling the author's giving us. Look how that's a comprehension technique as well as a way to fill in an anchor chart so they can not only use this for comprehension, but connect it to their own writing. These are strategies you can use to help students with an anchor chart specifically for the setting. We have anchor charts that you can give to students ready-made. These are descriptive words. When students are describing their setting, and it may be in the city, they can go to this word bank in order to find different descriptive words. I wanted to make this so that these descriptive words were easy to find. What am I describing in the setting? Oh, I'm describing the buildings in the city. So notice how I'm organizing this. I'm organizing it by nouns, by what you are describing. And the nouns are what are the important things in a city. Maybe the buildings. And then below that are many different descriptive words that could describe buildings. I have sounds and descriptive words for sounds, vehicles. So notice this is organized in categories by what is in a city that would be important to describe. So you have your categories with the descriptive words below. So if I'm a student and I was writing, and in my writing I was describing the setting and it was the city, and I needed to tell you about a building, I could go to building and find descriptive words right there to describe that building. The same goes over here on the next page for the country. It's set up exactly the same way. I have the nouns, the most important parts of the country or things in the country with the descriptive words below. Your students could also keep adding words to these charts, or if they have other describing words, they could even store them down here in a bank. Why am I going to add figurative language? Because something in my writing needs to pop. If I knew I wanted everyone to know that the little girl was really hungry, then I may say her stomach growled like a bear. I'm making that image, that idea pop in your mind because I, the writer, want you to really know this is important and to visualize it or to understand it through figurative language. That's my purpose. How do I organize it? I'm going to organize it in categories. I have imagery, personification, simile, hyperbole, idioms. And underneath that, I have secret formulas. You can actually cut those out and put them in these categories on your chart. How to create a simile, how to create personification. Below it is where we record, when we're reading, any type of figurative language or figures of speech that we come upon in our reading. And I don't mean that we do that all the time, but we may be reading and I may stop the students, and again, this would be a comprehension strategy connected to this writing anchor chart. I may read, and as I read, I may stop and say, boys and girls, the next sentence is going to be figurative language. Why is it figurative language? Because the author wants this to pop in our mind. It's important. Okay, let's read the next sentence. Then we read it, and let's say it was, the young girl's stomach growled like a bear. What was our figurative language? It was a simile. What was the author doing? Comparing the girl's stomach to what? A bear. A stomach and a bear, how are those the same? They're very different. Both growl. Why did the author use a bear for growl? Because a bear is dangerous, and when they're hungry and growl, it's scary. So when their stomach growled, you can almost hear this loud, growling, almost scary sound, like they'll do anything. So we identified that it was a simile, and then we could write it down and put it on our chart. So this way, when we're reading, we can actually give kids a heads up that there is some sort of figurative language so that they comprehend the author's using this to make that image pop in their mind, identify the type of figurative language, and when we identify that, talk about how the author formed it. In this case, a simile, two different things that are very different from each other, but have one characteristic that's similar, and we had growl. So we looked at how the author formed that, and then we wrote down the example and put it up on our chart. As you go through the year, you will find that you no longer have to alert students that figurative language is coming in their reading. They will naturally notice this. This is what's fabulous about these anchor charts. Not only do they create helpers for your students in their writing, but it also makes them better readers because they start becoming aware and noticing different parts of the text at that word and phrase level, and they understand what it means when they're analyzing it for these charts. I have describing words for characters. This is very similar to the anchor chart that I did with setting. Here we have our character, a person, and on this chart we have an animal. So what's the purpose of this chart? To describe. I'm talking about the physical features of a character. So we have a person, an animal. How did I organize this information? So I have it identified by nouns, hair, eyes, lips, with descriptive words underneath. I, many times, give students this chart already filled out, and as we go through the year, if we learn any descriptive words, we'll sort them on this chart. Just like the word banks for the setting, I have word banks for the characters. Remember, this is for their appearance, their physical features. So I have a character word bank here that I could give to students, and they could have this as a table copy. So if they were describing a person or an animal, and when you describe a person or an animal, their physical features, what are you doing? Their body parts, the parts of their body. So they would go to that part they're describing and they would find the descriptive word that would match the appearance of that character. Their skin, feathers, scales. Notice this is for animals. The nouns are specific to the parts of different types of animals with descriptive words underneath. Before I go to the next word banks that are on the following pages, I want to give you the anachronism, ape the character. Ape the character. A, appearance. P, personality. E, emotion. We reviewed Ape the Character when we did a Come Alive box in our narrative writing section. These pages are for you to use when you're aping a character. Let's turn the next pages to see that I have personality and emotion pages as well. Final two pages that deal with our Ape the Character. We have a list of personality words or style words. The character is wild, embarrassing. Notice I labeled these categories of descriptive words for personality and style with simple words that many children will use. Then I have more sophisticated words underneath. So the student would say, oh, the character's really dirty. Then I can go underneath the word dirty and we can find higher level words. Foul, dingy, messy. On the facing page, we have emotions or feelings. So there's the E in our ape. How does the character feel? Sad, mad, and then of course you have higher level words that they can choose from when they're telling how the character feels. These two pages are word banks that you would give the children as well for the 5 senses. When they need sensory descriptive words, what something looks like, what something feels like, sounds like, tastes like, smells like. Notice underneath what something looks like, it's categorized by the brightness, the size, color, speed, texture, shape. You could even add number, many, one, few. And on the following page, we have what something feels like, its temperature or flexibility, what something sounds like, what something tastes like, the flavor, what something smells like. You have this as a resource for your students. So when they are looking in a sentence and they see, oh, Tommy bit into an apple. What do we want to describe in that sentence? The apple. Then we ask our question, what kind of apple? How do we need to describe that apple? Do we need to describe what it looks like, feels like, or tastes like? Probably what it tastes like. Let's go to our different words and find a word that would match what the apple tastes like. Crispy, sour, sweet, tart. We have many different words there that we could choose from. This was an anchor chart for describing food. So notice this chart was specific. We were doing a lot of descriptive writing and the students were writing about food. We took our 5 senses and for the taste we also put the smell in the same category. And every time we had a new food, we would brainstorm, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Sound like when we're eating it? Smell like? Taste like? So this is an anchor chart that's specific to what you are writing about. This happened to be descriptions that were sometimes maybe just in themselves about an apple or a cake, or maybe it could be there was a cake in the story and the character was biting into the cake and you really wanted to describe that cake. It was important, so you could make a quick chart where you could put what does it look like, feel like, sound like, smell like, taste like. And it doesn't always work. When you're describing something and you're using the 5 senses, you don't use all 5 senses all the time. In this case, these did use the 5 senses, but you don't always use them. I may be describing a car. I don't tell you what a car tastes like. That wouldn't make sense. So when we're looking at our anchor chart here, this was a specific anchor chart, pulling in our 5 senses, as well as making it specific to what, in this case, we were describing. An anchor chart for action words are verbs. And what I tell the students, the verb is what? The most powerful part of speech. So I have weak verbs, run, walk, look, yell, said. I have all these different verbs here that we could go back and identify and replace with higher level, more sophisticated words that actually will be even more precise for our reader. And why do we do that? Because the verb kicks off the predicate, and that's the most powerful part of speech because it's telling us what's going on in the sentence. It's where a lot of the meaning is. We have transition anchor charts. Notice there's 2 transition anchor charts. The purpose of this top chart are transitions for narratives. The purpose for the bottom transition chart is for informative explanatory writing. So we have our purpose, what the chart is for. So if I'm writing narratives, I would look at this chart if I was trying to figure out a transition. How do I organize the transitions? I'm organizing it in categories. Many times a narrative will have transitions that are when, where, or sound effect transitions, because stories go through time and many times change locations, or the character is looking in different directions. So this is a great way to transition from sentence to sentence, is having when, where. Sound effect words are fun to add also. They add a little bit of that voice and style to your writing. Just don't go crazy with them. Students end up using them too much and it sounds stilted and it doesn't make sense in their writing. So we have our when, where, and our sound effect transitions. Down below here, we have our informative explanatory writing. If I were writing information and I needed transitions, if I'm organizing my information by categories or in a sequence, or it's descriptive writing, then I go to whichever section for the type of informative explanatory writing I am doing, how it's being organized. And then I would look, if I'm writing and I have to organize my details in categories, and when I am transitioning, I'm asking the function of that sentence. Am I telling you how many, or am I telling you which one? What am I doing in this next sentence? And there's my transition that I can choose from. Same thing with my sequencing. Is the next sentence telling you when something is happening or what order it is in? Once I know the function of that sequencing, I will choose the transition word that makes sense. When students are reading stories from their anthologies or from a read aloud or their own stories, one of the things that you want them to do is be aware of transition words. That helps with comprehension. It alerts you to what's going to be happening next at that very simple word or phrase level. Hence, this is a comprehension strategy, but also a writing strategy so that you can store these words on your anchor charts for transitions. This was the story Johnny Appleseed. It's a narrative. We've read this story several times during the week because we've been using this story for our comprehension work. When you finish with the story, it's the last day, the students have read this many times, and the reason why I like to use anthology stories is because they have their own copy that they can pull out at their desk. I ask them to go through the story and find the different transitions. When I first do this, I'll flip through and I'll just point out what the different transitions are. But after a while, they will just flip through a story and find the transitions. So all the students are at their desk, they're working in their table groups, they're telling each other what different transitions are. When I see a student spot a transition in the book and say what it is, I will already have the transitions from the story written on strips, and let's say the student finds one day. Then I will hand them and say, oh, that was one that was in there, you got it, one day. So I show them, boys and girls, I have all the transitions on my strips. See if you can find all the transitions the author used in this story, this narrative story. So they are searching in their book for transitions, and when they find one, under the stars, excellent, I will hand that to the student who finds it. So I'm walking around and I'm handing this to the students. Once all the transitions have been found, then I will ask, who has when transitions? And the student who had one day, they will come up and they will have that one day, and we will glue it underneath the when. Under the stars, we'll put for where. So I will ask students, any when transitions, any where, and we will put that. You could also add onto this chart and just put other for a category. So if you have one that you can't figure out, that transition where it would go, just put it under the other. The same goes for informative explanatory. If we have had an informative explanatory, an informational piece of writing in our anthology, we'll go back, we'll identify how is this writing organized? Find all those transitions that showed you categories or sequencing or a description. So they go in their books, they find them, I've already had them written out, and I hand it to the students, and then we come and put them up on the board. This again is a fabulous activity to not only fill in your anchor charts for writing so that when students are writing they can access these words to transition their sentences, but also it is a way for them to increase their comprehension at the phrase level, identifying transitions and their purpose and what they mean while they read. I have an anchor chart here for what is the purpose of this chart? A story closing. In the narrative writing section, I already introduced the secret formula, TCR, transition, character, reflection. At the end of a story, this is a great way to have a story closing, the final sentence. So students don't just say, that's it, the end, this was my story, I hope you like it. This is a way to end a story so that it has more style and sophistication, and it ends with a reflection. So we have a story closing sentence, and you can turn this into an anchor chart. Many transitions are listed here for children to choose. From that day on, looking back in the end. Then they choose the character. Who was the main character? Who was this story mostly about? Reflection. Take that character, whether it was yourself or a person, an animal, whoever that main character was, get into that character's skin and reflect back on the story. After going through all these events, what did that character wish, learn, feel, realize, discover, understand? Choose one of those in order to create a reflection and a fabulous way to end a story called a story closing. We have an anchor chart and the purpose is expository or informative explanatory hooks. How to hook a reader into a story. So we have this organized by hooks for informative explanatory or expository writing. Then what we've done is we have listed out different stems from different informative explanatory texts that we have read. How do I get these hooks on this chart, these stems? Because when students go to write their own hooks, they look at these words or phrases or sentences in order to start their own hooks. But how did we get these? Where did we get these from? I did a whole section in the informative explanatory writing on hooks, how to form hooks. This is just showing you that when you have an anchor chart, you can record those hooks on the anchor chart so students can access this. Where do I get those hooks? I could give kids different types of text. My favorite are the weekly readers or kids magazines. Why? Because they have short articles, and what do the articles usually start with? Hooks. I can pass out a bunch of different copies of different magazines and weekly readers, and they could go through and find different hooks. We can fill them on strips of paper so that we can start off with a large bank of hooks to kick off this anchor chart. As the year goes on, anytime we read any informative explanatory writing, the kids now have that awareness of what a hook is. So when we start reading, I may at first say, oh, there's a great hook at the beginning here. Let's read and stop at this hook. So we may read it, stop, record the stem, and put it up on our hook chart. Eventually, I want kids, as we read, I want them to say, oh, that was a hook. It sure was. What did the hook do? Did it give you an emotional reaction? Was it a riddle? Did it make you interested in wanting to read? Did it give you some background? What was the purpose of that hook? So eventually, you want to start pulling that piece in for your students as well. In this section, I showed you many different types of anchor charts. Anchor charts specifically for writing, because anchor charts can be used for many things, math, science, social studies, remember. This is specifically for writing, and we have set these charts up so that they align with what we're doing in this writing curriculum. So whenever the students are planning their papers, we may be planning narratives and they need a setting. Right away on the writing resource wall, we could go to the setting and use the anchor chart to help plan the setting as well as come up with words or phrases to write that setting. When you're putting together this resource wall, always plan in your curriculum if you need to continue filling it in. When will you do this? Will you do it while you're reading? Will you make the kids aware of something? Stop, fill it in on the chart? Will you do it after you've read the story many times and they go back and find these different features? Remember, you want these charts to be interactive, and the more that you can connect it to text and put it up on the anchor chart, the more they're going to increase their reading comprehension as well as use the charts in their own writing. When the year starts, most of these charts should be blank. The whole goal is that you and your students together are going to be filling in these charts. I showed you many different ways to do it: before reading, during reading, after reading. You want to put that in your schedule when you are going to fill in the anchor chart so that you remember to do it. You start off the year with those charts filled in, it's like wallpaper. They won't use them because they're not meaningful, they don't make sense to them. And you're losing that connection to reading and that comprehension piece that you can have with reading. Isn't it wonderful that by the end of the school year, you will actually have anchor charts completed with words and phrases that your students have read and many times used in their own writing? Talk about a way to increase language and vocabulary so that your students master these words and phrases and own them. And they will continue to use them in their writing for years to come. And be aware of other words and phrases in their reading because you're teaching them that strategy to be aware of setting, transitions, adjectives, figurative language. They start becoming aware of it and they internalize those words and phrases, and they can start using those as part of their own repertoire in writing. I highly suggest that you use these anchor charts. You will find it will make an incredible difference for reading and writing in your classroom.